Expectation and speculation is a fickle but powerful tool in the toolbox of developers. It's a good way to shore up support and excitement for your game, but if you let it run away from you, then you create a double-edged lightsaber that can come back and destroy a game when it would have otherwise been great if you'd have just set expectations correctly. And that's unfortunately what I think is happening with Star Wars Outlaws. This past week, I had the opportunity to sit down and play Star Wars Outlaws early for a total of 4 hours, where I got to tour the moon of Tashara, the spacescape in between with some space combat, and the landing zone of Kijimi with a short mission. And what stuck out to me initially was just how handcrafted and detailed the world of Tashara felt. Everything seemed like it was designed with intention, that somebody was behind every aspect of every piece of architecture, every curve of the hill, every outpost, and this is actually the kind of thing that I was hoping to see in an open world game. One of the things that I've become a little bit sick of is seeing the kind of auto-generated spaces that become samey after a while, which we got with games like Starfield and even to some extent No Man's Sky, even though that's a highly stylized game with a focus in exploration. And this is probably the route I should have expected to see them going. But the thing is that when you say open world Star Wars game, the thing that comes to mind is a space game. You show spaceships, you show planets, and the mind starts to create this fiction that is going to be something like No Man's Sky, something like Elite Dangerous or Star Citizen, when in reality, that was never really their intention. They're coming from a background of creating games like Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, The Division, all of which can be argued are open world games, but have ultimately limited play spaces. And that's exactly what this game is. The total size of the map of Tashara, which is only one of 5 planets we'll be able to visit, has a total area that I could see of around 9 square kilometers or 3.5 square miles, with a total longest distance of 4 kilometers. And I think a lot of people are going to get hung up on this. In fact, you may already be typing down below in the comment section about how you're disappointed in the size, and I don't blame you for doing so. Again, it's about setting the correct expectation. But in my experience playing in this open world space, I never really got the impression that I was limited. I was constantly running across NPCs going about their business, running across towns that needed my support for helping them fend off a group of attacking pirates, getting hung up on some faction rep that was limiting me from going to certain locations on the map. And this experience extended on into the cities like Miragana, the main landing area on Tashara. They did a really good job of making the city feel like it's part of the Star Wars universe, having that lived-in, retro-futuristic style that's the hallmark of architecture in this universe. But also, just as important, there are NPCs inhabiting this space to give it life. Those NPCs are going about their business and also having conversations that matter, that if you overhear, can lead you to new missions or stashes you may have overlooked. And they'll even react to your actions as you progress through the story, talking about rumors of things this new Outworlder has done to the local criminal gang. So it's very clear to me that Ubisoft, instead of focusing on creating very expensive and time-intensive tools for crafting big, open, but ultimately empty worlds, instead focused their attention and budget inwards on creating and crafting a highly detailed, densely packed environment that's akin more to something like we would have seen in the movies than something that we experienced in, again, Starfield. But once you're done with exploring the ground and you're ready to go up into space, here I can confirm that there is indeed a animated sequence that takes you from ground to space and space to ground. Just like we saw in the preview in the video I posted earlier, it's basically an animation, but one that's done particularly well, where there's a good transition from the space experience to the ground experience that feels seamless even though it's not, which I think makes it pretty successful. Now, when you get up into space, the spacescape that you're able to explore is also expansive but limited. There's gonna be hard borders, but even though there are borders, there are still things to experience, and they're relatively densely packed compared to what you might see out of a true spacescape simulation where there are immense distances between any kind of stellar object or point of interest. So it's definitely going for that more Star Wars-esque space theme where it's focusing on the visual spectacle of the experience of flying in space. And just like on the ground, there are NPCs going about their business, there are freighters, there are pirates that you'll interact with and fight, there are factions in space as well that will either help you or attack you depending on your standing with them. So there are things to experience in the space to keep you immersed while you're going about your business or participating in actual missions. And the planets also look really good. Even though I don't think they're fully simulated, certainly you can't fly around them, they do have a kind of parallax effect as you're flying through space, either to or from them or perpendicular to them. They have this kind of movement that makes it feel like you're traversing space at high speed. And since we're talking about the spacescape, I think it's also now worth talking about the space simulation part of it, the way that you fly your ship in the game. And well, it's basically as you might have expected from the Star Wars genre in general. Pretty much every single game I've played in the Star Wars universe has been arcadey, where it's like you're flying a space plane. That's basically like what happens in the movies. The X-Wings and the TIE Fighters fly like there's air resistance. They're banking and rolling and turning. They're not flipping end over end like Battlestar Galactica, like there's actual 6 degrees of freedom. But that doesn't mean it's not fun. It, in fact, was really fun. I got into some space combat with some pirates and tried to disable a freighter, which involved going after some of the subsystems in order to disable it. So there are some mechanics in space to worry about, like shields and repairs and trying to target subsystems, but there's nothing as advanced as like getting out of your ship seat and walking around your ship to repair things and regulating your system's power, balance, or and it's not even really as complex as, say, Star Wars Squadrons, which I think is a good comparison in terms of how the ships fly, but not in terms of the depth of space combat itself. But I wanted to circle back to 2 more points of concern for me going into this, and that was Kay and the combat of Star Wars Outlaws. And I gotta say that over the time I played with her for the 4 hours I got to enjoy the game, I actually really did like my time with her. She grew on me along with her little klepto cat Nix, and that's, I think, because she's really well voice acted and mocapped to bring a lot of life to her, making her stand out a bit more than I thought she would. She doesn't feel like a cardboard cutout or a stand-in for a better character that we might have had. That being said, she definitely has a kind of Han Solo feel to her. I feel like they pitched this game as a female Han Solo, and that's not a bad thing because her personality is unique to her. She's definitely not a carbon copy female version of Han Solo, but that scoundrel thing is quite familiar and actually a part of her I really like. But she also has a vulnerable side to her, which also endeared me to her a bit more. There's definitely some tragedy in her background, which is always a good setup for an interesting protagonist. Speaking of vulnerability, by the way, I think that's a good segue into the combat part that I wanted to talk about with Outlaws. There was a lot made of Kay's invulnerability from some previews that came out last week from IGN. And I don't think that was a very fair representation of the actual gameplay experience when you're playing Outlaws. She's a lot more vulnerable than that. She's more vulnerable than Cal Kestis even ever was as a Padawan. 3 to 4 shots or a couple grenades will kill her in combat, and that's on normal difficulty. But that doesn't mean there aren't any combat sequences or that they won't happen. There are moments that combat is unavoidable, but you're punished for standing out in the open and rewarded instead for taking cover. In fact, that 3-shot combo thing that people were kind of going on about wasn't as OP as it seemed. Her 3-shot lock-on ability is only able to charge up from taking cover, and I want to underline taking cover, so standing out in the open is not going to enable you to constantly use this. Some parts of the story can also be completed much more quickly and easily if you stealth through the location and only take out who you need to. I had to replay one mission because I was too slow to react to take down one of the enemies before they alerted the others, causing waves and waves of pike enemies to come out shooting at me. The problem was that the end of the level was locked behind a lock-picking mechanic which couldn't be completed if I was interrupted by being shot at. I think I spent a whole of like 5 minutes diving and defending and healing before I eventually died. And granted, though, I want to say that I was on a controller on a remote session that created a lot of difficulty for me with latency and response. But that's just how the demos were done in this case, and since I'm in Taiwan, I had like a 200 ping to the US server, and that's not how you are going to experience the game. It's not an online game that you play remotely. This is just purely for the demo. I want to be perfectly clear on that. Anyway, after dying, I passed the area in about a minute just by picking off who I needed to and sneaking my way through the entrance after disabling the security systems. I think it's also worth talking about the stealth mechanics here. Stealth is really rewarding outside of the heat of battle because you have more time to scope out possible valuables or locate better routes to the objective to get things done more efficiently. On stealth mechanics, the game behaves similarly to other games that you might have played, where there's a grace period to hide or disable an enemy before they raise an alarm. For Kay though, her little kleptocat Nyx has some great abilities that I found myself using a lot, like the ability to search for important objects in the area, or to use or disable panels, or the ability to distract enemies, even going to other parts of the map to blow something up, to draw them in that direction to clear an area, or to just jump straight on the enemy so that you have a moment to come up and knock them out. And Nyx can also nick things. I don't think her name's a coincidence here. You can use her abilities to either grab an extra buck or to actually steal some important things for a mission to get a better route. Enemies also don't seem to notice Nyx as much or not really care about her, so she's great for like looting items that are a bit too risky for you to approach directly. The more you seem to leverage her, the better things seem to go in missions, so it makes her more than just a set dressing, but an extension of the regular mechanics you'll find yourself using in virtually every part of the game. I also want to say that I just generally really like Nyx, and I really hope that they don't do anything to her. And all of this combat is tinged with the prospect of reputation. It does more than just restrict where you can go in a map and where you have to sneak around and who you can rely on to help you. It also affects, for example, what you can buy. If you've got poor rep with an owning faction, the area that sells things that's owned by them might not want to sell to you for a low price. They might jack it up or not sell you things at all. And this reputation affects your relationships with the characters you meet and what missions you're able to get. In effect, then, this mechanic is not just a novelty, it's something that creates meaningful consequences that will weigh on your decisions that you make throughout the gameplay experience, and will presumably affect the outcome of the game. But I only played 4 hours, so I can't say what endings are available to Kay depending on the decision of who you side with. So yeah, my first impressions of Star Wars Outlaws has been really positive. I really enjoyed playing Kay Vess and with their little cat Nyx, and the characters I met along the way, they're well voice acted, they're well mocapped, the detail in the game is fantastic, it looks really modern and sharp, and the open world spaces aren't super big, but they're detailed enough that it makes it feel like a living and breathing universe, with choices that matter and affect the way that you play the game. So it might not be the full epic Star Wars themed space simulation game that I thought it might be a long time ago when they first announced developing this game, but what it is actually really good. But I tried to come into this with an open mind. This isn't the typical Star Wars game I've played in the past. There's not a Jedi hero as the protagonist, which probably is going to turn some people off about Outlaws. It's not going to be for everyone, but I'm glad I gave it a chance. So what about you guys? Are you thinking about picking this up now, or are you still on the fence? If there's something important in this video that I missed talking about that you want to know about, please feel free to ask down in the comment section below. But we still have some time before it's released on August 30th, where it'll be coming out for PlayStation 5, Windows, and the Xbox Series X and S. I'll definitely be doing some more coverage of this game leading up to its release. Hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on it early to give you guys a bit more of an in-depth look at what to expect when you pick it up. But I think that this first impression has been pretty enlightening and eye-opening for me. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comment section below. Otherwise, I hope to see you in the next one.